This is a podcast overview of the objectives for Chapter 8, Social Influence. So you'll want to understand the differences between conformity, compliance, obedience, and symbolic social influence. So those are all the key areas that are covered over the course of this entire chapter. So you'll see that the chapter is cut up into segments, each dealing with these key areas. First, explain what is a social norm and how does it function in society. What are some of the rules that govern social norms, telling what's acceptable or not acceptable in a given society. Explain why we conform and the role of introspection illusion. So what would be reasons why we would want to conform to others or to those around us? And you're going to learn a lot here from Solomon Asch. So he's the big name here with conformity. He did some of the most early work in the area of conformity. So you want to be able to outline the methods, goals, and general findings from Asch's famous studies on conformity. And I also posted a couple videos that deal with conformity. So watching those and also reading this section of the textbook at the same time together, comparing notes, is going to be helpful in understanding the basis of conformity, like why, what compels us to conform. Sometimes people think of conformity as a negative word. There are definitely benefits to conformity, but then there are also drawbacks. Consider how cohesiveness and group size affect conformity. So this is actually talked about by Asch in his studies. It matters how cohesive a group is, how together they are, and it matters the size of the group and whether or not a person conforms. Then you want to contrast descriptive and injunctive norms. Know some examples of each of these. And in doing so, state the relevance of normative social influence and informational social influence. So these are different areas where we get sort of our cues as to how to act. We are influenced by the people around us. This is social influence. Every single person is subject to social influence, just in a variety of ways. And we are because we grow up in a society of people. No one grows up in a cave alone by themselves. So of course, people are going to influence what you do, what you wear, how you speak, what you believe, how you feel, and all of those types of things. But there are certain sort of governing norms as to how this occurs. So you want to be familiar with all of those and be able to pick out some examples. Describe how social psychologists have previously and currently studied how social norms persist over time, right? So some social norms kind of get outdated or they change over time as society changes. What social norms persist? Which ones are more hardy over time and don't change as much with the social currents or the social tides? Discuss the various reasons why we sometimes do not or cannot conform. So sometimes we choose not to conform, or sometimes we want to conform, but we can't. There's something holding us back. So know those kinds of situations and why they're important. Explain the concept of emotional contagion in social influence. So we are influenced by others. A dramatic example of that would be emotional contagion. What occurs in this kind of instance, and how does it affect people? Consider when and how the minority can influence the majority. When would this be the case? And in history, how have we seen this? Explain the gender differences in conformity. So not all conformity looks alike between males and females. And you're going to see this when we look at Milgram's study. Now, Milgram looked more at obedience, but it had conformity at its base, okay? So in order to obey authority, which is kind of what we see with the Milgram studies, you're doing so also because you're in part conforming to expectations that are placed on you or by those around you. So be able to explain what that looks like, and especially given the gender differences that you'll see also happen in the revised new Milgram study, which is in the video that I posted this week. Then explain the 6 basic principles of compliance. So this is the work of Robert Cialdini. He said that if you want to get somebody to do what you want or do what you say, which is compliance, that there's some ways to go about it, right? And so advertising and marketing and business has been very quick to pick up on these basic principles, and they are the root of all ads, all media techniques to get someone to buy a product, vote a certain way, subscribe to an idea of some sort. And so know what those principles of compliance are and know examples of each. Explain the 6 tactics for gaining compliance that are grounded in these principles of compliance. So in each principle of compliance, there's certain tactics that are used, so also know those. And then provide a detailed overview of the initial Milgram obedience study. So this is one that you'll be reading about in the extra article reading this week. It is a video also that I posted, the original Milgram study, that you'll want to watch. You'll want to look at those, compare those. What was the methodology of Milgram's study? What did he hope to find? What were his hypotheses? And what did he find? What were the results of the study? And were there any ethical concerns with how he conducted his study? What were they? Also provide a few examples of subsequent obedience studies conducted by Milgram and others and their results. So Milgram was really just the front runner of obedience studies. Once he got started, he couldn't stop. He did many variations of his original studies. He changed up the dynamics. He changed who was in the room in his studies, how many people. So you'll want to know what those different variations were. And then other people also replicated Milgram's findings. I mean, the key to a really great study is, can you replicate it? And many did. So what did they find? Describe the social psychological basis for destructive obedience. So this is when obedience is not good. You know, we are taught to obey authority, and it's generally a good thing. If we did not, we would have chaos. We would have anarchy. Obedience is good. But when is it not good? How do we draw the line? And what is that line? And how can individuals resist its effects? And that wraps up the objectives for Chapter 8.